The tragedy that unfolded at her father's fishing wharf was the last thing she expected on a peaceful morning. A rumble of motorbikes shook Eagles Point Harbor to its very foundation, and in an instant Jessica Dawson would be encircled by the most infamous gang in not one, not two, but 3 states. As their leader menacingly circled her, she could feel her heart racing, as the Iron Serpents were not known for their mercy. Little did these dangerous men, and no one else in town, know that her modest father was going to impart upon them the harshest lesson they would ever endure. They assumed Edward Dawson was no different from any other fisherman from a little community. His old hands, calm grin, and humble manner were visible to them. His daughter was probably his target, so they reasoned, he must be weak and easy to intimidate. They were about to find out how mistaken they had been. The Iron Serpents would learn in the minutes to come that they hadn't targeted any fisherman's daughters. The little daughter of a Navy SEAL had been threatened. Some blunders are one-time occurrences. A moment of silence before moving forward. Could you please tell us from what location you are viewing this? The episode that drops tomorrow is simply mind-blowing, so if you're liking these stories, you should subscribe. At Eagles Point Harbor, the lake is veiled in morning mist as the sound of soft waves caressing wooden piers accompanies a serene melody. Halting precariously on her father's old fishing pier, Jessica Dawson stands there, her breath caught in the cool morning air. She carries herself with the self-assurance of someone who has lived and breathed these docks, checking gear and getting ready for another day of charter fishing expeditions, even though she is just 23 years old. As the faraway sound of motorbikes rumbles over the lake, the tranquil morning is shattered. As Jessica looks down the road that leads into the marina, her hand stops coiling the rope. As time goes on, the sound becomes increasingly terrifying and deafening. As the sun rises, the chrome bikes of the Iron Serpents shine like ghosts in the early mist. Arriving at the marina's gravel parking lot, 5 motorcyclists flaunt patches of territory and violence on their leather cuts. Blake King, their leader, switches off his engine first, finding the subsequent quiet more frightening than the din that had come before. Jessica's knuckles turn white as she clamps her fingers down on the rope. The Iron Serpents have a reputation for ferocity and intimidation, and she has heard whispers about them in local diners, but they have never visited Eagles Point Harbor before today. With the sound of his boots crunching on the gravel, Blake effortlessly dismounts his bike. So, what exactly is this? With an air of condescending intrigue, his voice reverberates over the marina. A tiny child appears to be playing with boats. Jessica keeps at her task, attempting to appear composed even though she is anything but. She diverts her attention from the sound of approaching footsteps to the deliberate act of winding the rope. Although she is visibly terrified, she maintains a steady voice as she explains that this is a private charter company. I will have to politely ask you to depart unless you have a reservation. The sound of the motorcyclists' laughter reverberates through the deserted marina. Invading her personal space on purpose, Blake advances toward her. Marcus, his right-hand guy, positions himself on either side of him while the others form a loose circle around Jessica. Is this the booking? Blake's mouth forms a mischievous smile. Bookings are unnecessary for the Iron Serpents, my darling. Whenever we like, we can go. Mike Henderson, who is inside the marina office, keeps a worried expression on his worn face as he glances out the window. His somewhat shaky fingers grab for the phone and dial a number he knows off by heart. While teaching a young family bass fishing techniques on the lake, Edward Dawson's phone starts buzzing. Mike instantly retracts his line in response to something in his voice. Mike, is everything well at the dock? I need you to return here, Dan. Just now, the Iron Serpents appeared out of nowhere and are now shark-circling Jessica. Edward tightens his jaw but keeps his voice level. I'll be there in a flash. He then smiled apologetically at his customers. This morning's lesson will have to be shortened due to a family emergency, everyone. Blake had gotten much closer to Jessica at the dock. He extends his hand and runs a finger along the twisted rope that she is holding. Knots look great. Did you learn that from your dad? Seeing his daughter take over the family business must make him very proud. She takes a few paces back, her back straight. "I told you had to go." A harsh and biting sound accompanies Marcus's laughter. "Blake, I can tell she has spirit." "Which is great." Another motorcyclist interjects, blocking Jessica's route to the marina office, that it's more entertaining when they put up a little resistance. The grin on Blake's face begins to wane. "We have been considering extending our territory, you know." Eagles Point Harbor appears to be a charming small place. Calm and serene. His fascination in the marina is magnified as he surveys the area. "Do you not think this would be the ideal spot for our new clubhouse?" Despite her racing heart, Jessica maintains a calm demeanor. "I am the owner of this property. You're not welcome here." "Is it theft?" In a fit of laughter, Blake cocks his head back. "Listen up, guys. The little girl believes that these docks are hers." His face turns gloomy. "My darling, allow me to explain something to you. Whoever is brave enough to grab what is rightfully theirs." Jessica resolutely refuses his grasp on the rope. For an instant, they're engaged in a quiet struggle of wills, refusing to release each other. A little quiver in Jessica's voice betrays her warning that she would not do it if she were in your shoes. An iron grasp is hardened by Blake. "And what does that mean? Will your dad come to your rescue?" A frightening whisper becomes his voice. "In any case, where is Daddy?" While his tiny kid braves the world on her own, he's out fishing. As they draw near, the other motorcyclists near, the sound of their leather wounds cracking. Patches stitched into aged leather read, "No Mercy," and "Iron Serpents MC." The morning sun strikes these patches. "Perhaps we ought to remain," Marcus proposes. He kept staring at Jessica the whole time. Let her see how actual men manage a company. Jessica's thoughts wander. Thanks to Mike's call, her father is likely already making his way back to the lake, but she has no idea how much longer he will be gone. She must prevent the matter from getting worse by buying herself some time. Attempting to infuse her voice with assurance, she states that the sheriff conducts regular patrols through this area. He'll be right over. Blake lights up with joy. "I don't think so. Just so you know, we were able to evade the local cops around 10 miles ago." It appeared as though he was coping with a tragic highway accident. "I might spend hours there." Jessica takes a tumble as he abruptly lets go of the rope. "There is an infinite amount of time for us." The sound of the motorcyclist's laughter has taken on a darker undertone once more. Mike, his face betraying his anxiety, is on the phone, and Jessica looks over toward the marina office to see him. "This is it," Jessica says, her shoulders back. "Do you want to go now or what?" Standing taller than before, Blake approaches her. "Are you going to lead us?" "Little girl, which army are you a part of?" The suspense is broken by the low rumble of a boat engine that is drawing near. Knowing the sound may be anywhere gives Jessica a little sigh of relief. Going back to the dock is the charter boat her dad owns. When Blake hears anything, he tilts his head slightly, but he doesn't run away. Presumably, Dad is returning home. "I hope he can share his fishing knowledge with us." A hint of sarcasm permeates his voice. "I have always wished I could get some advice from an expert." As Edward Dawson boat draws near the pier, the morning sun emerges from the fog. Jessica stands where she can see her father's familiar form at the wheel, guiding the ship home with slow and calm movements. In contrast to the Iron Serpents, Edward's eyes carefully survey the surroundings, absorbing each detail with the deftness of an experienced warrior. They fail to perceive his rapid assessment of their locations, angles, and potential dangers. Their preferences color their perceptions. Unaware of the consequences that await them, a harmless fisherman is making his way back to port. As the engine dies off, the marina falls into a tense, anticipatory stillness. In a nasty and self-assured smirk, Blake returns his attention to Jessica. The moment has finally arrived when everything will become exciting. With the ease of an expert, Edward Dawson maneuvers his boat to the dock. There isn't a trace of calculation showing on his worn face as he surveys the surroundings. Jessica is around by 5 motorcyclists in a loose semicircle. The morning sun reflects from their leather cuts, and patches on their bodies proclaim their loyalty to the Iron Serpents MC. He unties the boat with lightning speed and pinpoint accuracy. At the stern, his customers, a young family he had been fishing with, huddle anxiously, perceiving the tension around them. In a low, non-threatening voice, Edward tells them to go straight to their cars. Turn away and stay out of it. Hurrying past the motorcyclists, the family reaches the parking lot, with the father dragging his children close. With a clear sense of amusement, Blake watches them leave before shifting his focus to Edward. Blake shouts across the dock, "Well, if it isn't Daddy Dearest," his voice resonating. The party is about to begin. As Edward steps onto the dock, the sound of his boots striking the wood underneath him is audible. He walks leisurely, taking his time with each stride. His old pants, faded flannel shirt, and years of sun-etched face make him look like any other middle-aged fisherman to the motorcyclists. They fail to perceive that he has meticulously planned every possible strategy, including the placement of all accessible weapons. "My name is Jessica," Edward declares with a calm voice. "Are we all right?" Blake interrupts Jessica before she can respond. "We have been very careful with your little girl." Showing her the ropes of respect and the practical side of life. Keeping his distance from the group at a precise distance, Edward resumes his steady approach. "Is that correct?" Even though he keeps his tone casual, Marcus can't help but feel uneasy whenever he looks into his eyes. "Dear Dad," once again, Blake speaks over Jessica as she begins. "It was only that we were talking about potential business opportunities." With his arms outstretched, Blake declares. "There is a lot of potential in this marina. Perhaps fresh leadership is needed." Although Edward's face remains unchanged, there is a noticeable difference in the atmosphere. "Got it. Would you be the new head of the department?" Blake lights up with joy. Astute guy. "Okay, now you see the big picture. Do what the strong want. Sluggish, figure out how to deal with it or just don't." The decision they made. That philosophy is intriguing. Edward responds with a composed tone. "Have you worked with that a lot?" A massive man on 2 wheels who carries a patch reading Goliath advances. "Are you funning us, sir?" In Edward's view, it's all about having a conversation and attempting to put yourself in your shoes. His focus returns to Blake. "Therefore, what are you essentially suggesting here?" Blake still chuckles, but now his laughter has a bite to it. The old fisherman's placidity is beginning to irritate him. "Want to make a proposal?" "Nothing is being proposed by me. I'm going to spill the beans on how it plays out." "Is this boathouse?" "Now we're in Steel Viper country. Would you like to continue offering your fishing tours? With your protection fee, we will compensate you. Desire to ensure the security of your lovely daughter? You should pay us more." In a move so understated that the motorcyclists fail to perceive it, Edward raises his hand slightly as Jessica begins to object. However, Jessica knows the signal from her years of working with her father and promptly falls silent. "Safeguarding," Edward says with some contemplation. "Where did the money come from?" Marcus approaches Jessica with a scowl. "Away from us. It would be unfortunate if anything were to happen to your boats or your girlfriend." As Marcus moves, Edward watches closely, noticing how the biker's hand is resting on his belt and the faint shape of a knife under his cut. Subconsciously shifting into attack postures, the other motorcyclists are gradually widening their distance. Edward remains chatty while he accuses you of endangering his daughter. This is not up for debate. Threatening? Blake puts on a naive face. Absolutely not, I'm merely stating the obvious. Strong endure, weak perish. They eventually figure it out. Dan gently gives a nod. This makes sense to me. And you think you're a strong person? Blake hesitates at the sound of his voice, but the leader of the motorcyclists laughs it off. Old man, look around. 4 of us. Among you. Although your daughter is attractive, she is unimportant. Math isn't that difficult, is it? According to Edward's moderate response, numbers might be misleading. With a crack of his knuckles, Goliath advances once more. An old-timer can't be fooled by a thrashing. Dear Dad, the worry in Jessica's voice is palpable as she repeats herself. Even though she has witnessed her father relax before, this time is different. Just like the quiet before a storm, this is happening right now. You're not alone, Jessica. With his unwavering gaze fixed on Blake, Edward gives her his word. The gentlemen are on the verge of discovering a crucial truth regarding power. As Blake's amusement wanes, he becomes increasingly irritated. Respect is beginning to creep into the air due to the old man's unwavering composure. You blew your last opportunity, that's all. Unless you want to subject your kid to the prospect of seeing her father broken, you'd rather take the easy way out. Edward advances just one step. The motion is so fluid and under control that Blake unknowingly steps back for a moment before he catches himself. Let me be clear, Edward adds, his voice slightly falling. You showed up at my harbor. My daughter was threatened by you. Stealing someone else's property is what you're referring to. Your complete lack of comprehension regarding true strength is evident from that. Am I correct in thinking that? Blake reaches behind him and clasps a hefty chain around his waist. Then why don't you teach us something? Without changing his expression, Edward watches the movement with his eyes. Are you certain that's your desire? It might be costly to get a degree. It took a lot of effort to prepare and tell this story, so please subscribe if you found it enjoyable. We are deeply grateful. We will return to the story now. Anxietism grows in the atmosphere. Nature seems to be holding its breath, even the early birds have fallen silent. Jessica notices her father's stance changing in ways the bikers didn't notice, his weight shifting slightly, his hands hanging loose but prepared at his sides. Blake snaps at you, his patience wearing thin, because you're an elderly guy with a sharp tongue. To begin, perhaps we should permanently turn it off. Goliath and Marcus start to advance after he gives them the signal to do so. Edward remains completely composed, showing no signs of fear or retreat. He does nothing more than wait. As a final opportunity, Edward murmurs softly. Just go now, and we will forget you ever said it. As it dangles, Blake removes the chain from his belt. Oh, my goodness, we're so far beyond just walking away, dude. As soon as the clouds part, the morning light rises, illuminating the pier with its strong shadows. Jessica notices a shift in her father's expression as the motorcyclists brace themselves for action. Something new has emerged, but the tranquility remains. Something about this tranquil marina betrays the history of conflicts waged and triumphed upon in distant lands. Some waterways run deep, and the Iron Serpents are about to find out why. Quietest predators aren't always the safest, either. Goliath charges at Edward first, his enormous body belying his lack of fighting experience. He lunges at the elder man's jaw, slicing through the morning air, but his punch lands in the fog instead. Goliath misses for an entire second because Edward's movement is so deft and efficient. What on earth? As he continues to move ahead, Goliath mutters and stumbles ever so slightly. As his enforcer gets back on his feet, Blake stares helplessly, his grasp slackened. I get the uneasy feeling. The elderly fisherman's speed was excessive. Not getting it? Asking softly, Edward maintains his casual stance as if nothing has transpired. Snarling, Goliath unleashes yet another assault, this time a barrage of fists that would have knocked out an average man. With the economy of motion befitting years of preparation, Edward evades danger at every turn, yet he isn't present for any of them. Do not move, old man. As he swings wildly, Tank's rage reaches a boiling point. Why? Edward keeps an even tone in his voice. Seems like you're holding your own. With a swift motion, Marcus draws his knife. As he opens it, the blade catches the light of dawn. Show me how you jive with this, Pops. Just as Jessica is about to come forward, Edward's voice interrupts her. My darling, remain put. Trust me, I've got this. There is a hint of unease in Blake's laughter now. In charge? Veteran, you are outnumbered. And now you must contend with steel. Edward whispers that knowing how to use numbers is more important than knowing the numbers themselves. Marcus swings the knife in a lunge, while Goliath approaches from behind. It ought to have been an ideal trap. On the contrary, Edward elegantly walks between them, and Goliath is left splayed on the dock, his momentum working against him. As Marcus clumsily retreats, his knife hand contorted into an ungainly slant. What on earth? As soon as Marcus tries to speak, Edward adds a little more pressure to his wrist, causing him to gasp and interrupt him. Language, Edward speaks gently scoldingly. A gift for my daughter. After the knife clatters to the dock, Edward gives Marcus a little push to set him free, and he stumbles back into Blake. With his chain swaying erratically, the gang leader must move swiftly to prevent being knocked down. Can you tell me who I am? Blake becomes more assertive, his self-assurance beginning to waver a bit. No big deal, Edward says gently. I mentioned before that figures might be misleading. Having hung back, the other two motorcyclists now advance with apprehension. Even more so for an elderly fisherman, they have never witnessed anyone else so quickly subdue Goliath and Marcus. Something doesn't seem right, one of them timidly tells the boss. Anger darkens Blake's face. Quit being a braggart and simply take him. They charge forward in unison, but Edward sways between their strikes like water. A motorcyclist lunges at Edward, who deftly sidesteps the blow and uses the attacker's momentum to propel him into his sidekick. They stumble over one another after a grunt collision. From the sidelines, Jessica feels a mixture of terror and another emotion as her heart races. Feeling proud. She had no idea her father had a fighting side until she witnessed him in this moment. Despite this, he is navigating storm-tossed waters with the same composed skill while dealing with 5 deadly men. My father? Goliath gets to his feet. Ag. Ein, and she yells out to him. In your wake. As Tank's untamed charge plunging him directly into one of the dock's wooden supports approaches, Edward swiftly moves to step away. Goliath falls like a stone as the solid thunk of skull-meeting wood reverberates around the marina. Does anyone else share this? With the same conversational tone, Edward asks. Around his chain, Blake's knuckles turn white. To what extent are you a fisherman? The type who, as Edward puts it, is offering you a final opportunity to depart. Bring your companion along. He gives Goliath the silent signal to get out of there before things escalate. This is serious. There is now a hint of frenzy in Blake's laughter. So you consider this to be a game? No, Edward responds with a hint of a low voice. In my opinion, this is just the latest in a string of bad choices you've been making. Can I make another one for you? After getting back on his feet, Marcus rubbed his wrist and sent Edward an icy look. Hello, boss. Who is this man? It's not like him. Shut up, Blake orders. Do it immediately, everyone. The rest of the aware motorcyclists exchange wary glances. Their self-assurance has completely dissipated due to Edward's extraordinary talent. Blake, who had been using his chain offensively, now appears to be even less confident. I can do this all day, Edward calmly informs them. I would be devastated to let down my clients if we can't go on our charters this afternoon. Think this is finally over? Even if he steps back slightly, Blake demands. Do you really believe you can humiliate the Iron Serpents and then disappear? I believe, Edward retorts, that you arrived seeking easy prey and discovered something rather different. Is your intelligence sufficient to draw wisdom from this? A look of fury crosses Blake's face. He yells out as he deadly arcs the chain toward Edward's head. As soon as the metal whistles through the atmosphere, Danny vanishes. The forward speed of the chain throws Blake off his balance, and he plummets to the ground as the world spins around him. Edward counteracts this by using his own body weight and motion. Blake slams into the dock with force, sending the chain clattering across the boards. Edward stands over him, maintaining his expression of calmness, as he glances up. Concerning that schooling you desired, Edward murmurs softly. Now that the sun has fully risen, it has burned away the remaining mist. Now that it's all in the open, the Iron Serpents' terrifying reputation appears to be fading at the same rate, and they appear to be nothing more than bullies who chose the wrong victim. And now they are going to learn the hard way from Edward Dawson, the unassuming fisherman they had grossly misjudged. Blake drags himself to his feet, the fall having left his leather cuts dirty and his haughtiness replaced with a terror that verges on being real. Unbeknownst to him, the casual ease with which Edward had dealt with his assaults has deeply unsettled him. Blake slowly backs away as he accuses you of having received training. For the military? Something flits in Edward's eyes, while his demeanor remains unchanged. Is it significant? Hi there, boss, while continuing to treat his twisted wrist, Marcus cries out. That kind of move is nothing new to me. Our cousin was a member of the Force Reconnaissance Unit. This training isn't haphazard. Jessica notices the look of awareness on the faces of the bikers. Even though she has grown up hearing tales about her father's background, witnessing him in action is a completely new ballgame. She still sees the patient, kind man who taught her how to read the weather and tie fishing knots, but she can also see the fierce fighter hiding beneath. Special Forces veteran, Edward murmurs softly, his voice resonating through the eerily calm dock. I've been retired for 15 years, yet there are some things that stay with you. Blake's complexion lights up. Seal. That is why it is that you are all still aware. Edward maintains an informal tone. You would suffer harm if I desired it. Rather, I'd want to share with you some valuable lessons on respect. The youngest rider in the bunch begins to edge closer to his bike. Hey boss, how about we do it? There is complete stillness. Even if his voice quivers a little, Blake snaps. The Iron Serpents are our name. We refuse to budge. Edward lets out a low sigh. One day, your pride will be your downfall. For today, it will only serve to disgrace you. Upon recovering consciousness, Goliath groans while positioned on the dock. He gets down on one knee and shakes his head to clear his throat. Excuse me. What transpired? In a soothing voice, Edward warns him that his boss is about to mess up again. I wouldn't recommend getting out of bed for this one. As Blake shifts his hand to his back, Jessica spots the shimmer of metal. My father? However, Edward is already on the go. Just as Edward gets closer to catching up to Blake, the gun he was grabbing for never leaves his waistband. He has years of military training, so his motions are economical and precise. The gun drops to the pier unharmed as Blake's arm is firmly held behind him, causing him to gasp. That was your biggest mistake yet, Edward adds, his voice sharpening for the first time. Edward sends Blake tumbling once more with a change of direction and a leg sweep. At Jessica's feet, the cannon scuttles across the dock and comes to a halt. With extreme caution, she grasps it, as if it were a potential threat. Glance at Blake for 15 years, that's a seal, Edward says, continuing to glance down. Does that make sense to you? Meaning I've completely lost all knowledge of fighting, which you will never know. This indicates that I have encountered dangers that would cause you to defecate. This proves that endangering my daughter was your worst mistake. Marcus moves ahead with a stutter. This was news to us. Edward interrupts him, highlighting the point. You can't predict. You gallop into town, flail around like a prehistoric shark, and act like you own the place. But somewhere in the shadows, there's always something that has been through actual fighting and encountered actual foes. Now he turns to speak to each of them individually, his voice commanding attention. I've fought in uncharted territories and against unfathomable foes. Do you really believe that your ability to frighten merchants and fishermen makes you a tough guy? You should attempt confronting real terrorists. Visualize yourself swimming through dangerous waters while gunshots follow your every move. With all of their former machismo gone, the bikers remain still. No one is getting up from the ground anymore, not even Blake. The truth, though, is that there is a significant distinction between us. Then Edward goes on. This is not something I have to prove. Strolling about threatening others isn't necessary for me to feel strong. Power at its finest. Knowing when to back down is a sign of true strength. Jessica observes her father, who she perceives through a fresh perspective. She had been aware of his service for a long time, but she had never grasped its significance. She is starting to understand the extent of his expertise as she watches him expertly deal with 5 dangerous men. According to Edward, who speaks with a steady but authoritative tone, this is what's going to happen. You will mount your bicycles, pedal away from Eagle's Point Harbor, and carry this memory with you every time you consider disturbing the tranquil inhabitants. Blake musters the will to get down on one knee, his expression betraying a whirlwind of mixed feelings, anger, shame, and terror. Think this is finally over? According to Edward, it's up to you to decide. Either you're stupid and give up, or I can keep showing you why it's a horrible idea. You get to decide, although I should probably warn you that I have the whole day to attempt, and I haven't even gotten around to it yet. Goliath gets to his feet clumsily, still dazed from his collision with the pier post. He is correct, boss. Sure, let's go. Blake snarls, shut up, but he no longer means it. Marcus unexpectedly cuts in and tells everyone to stop talking. No need to get into a battle with that dreadful seal, we were only here for the simple money. That's it. The younger riders acknowledge with a nod, swiftly making their way back to their bikes. Blake is the only one who keeps his head up high and refuses to budge from his knees. With the calm composure of someone who has weathered greater sieges, Edward observes them. A man's pride is a curious thing, he whispers. The message it's giving you right now is to not give up. But knowledge? Cut your losses, advises wisdom. The last of the morning fog has been burned away as the sun has risen higher in the sky. Suddenly, the Iron Serpents' terrifying image appears to be fading away, and all they appear to be is a group of bullies who have finally encountered an opponent they can't control. The shy fisherman Edward Dawson, whom they had grossly misjudged, yet has more to teach them about true power. As his gang starts to break up, Blake stays on his knees and watches his life fall apart. Ahead of the younger members, Marcus has begun to make his way to his bike. Despite the obvious signs of concern on his face, only Goliath clings to his commander. You get out of here, Blake orders his retreating soldiers. Hear me out. You're out. No coming back. The tension is broken by Edward's voice. To me, that seems like a promotion. Marcus stops and turns around. What is the intended meaning of that? Which, to paraphrase Edward, means you get to choose. You can choose to be with someone who would kill you for his ego, or you can be strong and independent. The people are shielded by certain leaders. Some people use them as protection. As he gets to his feet, Blake's face flushes with embarrassment and fury. Leadership is a completely foreign concept to you. Silently, Edward mentions his 3 tours as team leader in war zones. You underestimate my knowledge. I know something else as well. Honest leaders put their followers' needs before their own. As Jessica observes, the younger motorcyclists exchange looks. Her father's words are striking a chord with guys who have likely never questioned their decisions before, and she can see it. Blake spits out that they're simply terrified. Unnerved by an elderly gentleman. No, Edward breaks it to him. You should strive to be as intelligent as they are. He then turns to face the other motorcyclists head-on. I thought you all had training, right? For the military? Gradually, Marcus gives a nod. The vast majority of people head off. Returning to civilian life proved to be an elusive task. The group. That was helpful. Structure. Main goal. A close relationship. At this point, Edward's voice carries comprehension. However, we are not brothers. Harassment lies here. You are superior to it, too. As he advances, Tank's once enormous stature seems to shrink a bit. When I was in the army. Had 2 stints in the Afghan war. Head off. Was confused. I had hoped the club would make up for everything. Did it, though? No. Subtly, Goliath concedes. Instead, it transformed me into someone I had no interest in being. A look of rage crosses Blake's face. Disloyal individuals. Everyone here. According to Edward, they aren't betraying you. They're rediscovering their true selves. The armed forces. Fighting men. Men whose values extended beyond the dread of minor cities. Now Jessica can see that Goliath is crying. Some emotion is penetrating his hard facade. All of the other motorcyclists had halted their progress toward their bikes. In the midst of a time of intense gravity. You are aware of my gaze, Edward says further. They are men who have served their nation. True brotherhood was unknown to them. True objective. You seem to lose it somewhere throughout your journey. Embraced a companion who remained oblivious to the significance of that. As of right now, Marcus completely flips around. He seemed concerned. What we simply do is. Nothing was right after I got out. It was all a mirage. I know, Edward whispers gently. Trust me, I am aware. I was also confused when I first stepped outside. Recognizing my way back took quite a while. The strength we honed while serving others isn't for taking control, but rather for keeping people safe. Despite Jessica's continued possession of the rifle, Blake is rendered immobile by Edward's piercing stare. Edward advises subtly not to. Today, you have aired enough. Jessica cautiously advances, maintaining the gun's aim at the floor. Can you tell me what to do with this, Dad? Edward tells the person to unload it. The same way I instructed you. She performs it effortlessly, and the bikers appear shocked. With expert accuracy, she checks the chamber as the magazine falls into her palm. You instructed your daughter in the proper use of weapons? Marcus inquires. Edward points out that he taught her to admire them. Distinction exists. In the same way that being physically strong is not the same as bullying. Now that the sun is higher in the sky, the morning has warmed up to the point where it casts shorter shadows across the dock. The motorcyclists' expressions, shame, realization, and the gradual dawn of understanding, are illuminated by the strong light. According to Edward, it's still not too late. Everyone here. You still carry inside you the manhood that existed before you were a soldier, a warrior, and a defender. For a while, you just lost track of them. Goliath uses the palm of his hand to abrasively dab his eyes. How are we to proceed? Can you tell me where we should go? Edward suggests beginning with a simple act of self-reflection. Help is available through veteran programs run by individuals who have been where you are and can relate to your struggles. Blake takes a flying leap ahead, but Edward deftly sidesteps him, allowing the gang leader to pass him on his momentum. He removes Blake's legs from beneath him in a single stroke, forcing him to the dock with his face down. Edward sighs, frustrated that he still hasn't learned. The time it takes to complete a lesson varies. Despite their leader's plight, the other riders do nothing to aid him. On the contrary, they appear to be watching with a mix of shame and relief, as if they were witnessing the conclusion of something that ought to have concluded a long time ago. Edward softly informs the pinned man that his decision wasn't limited to today. It was about the countless times you steered these men astray, diminishing their potential with each passing day. Police sirens start to blare from a distance. It seems like Mike Henderson did, in fact, contact them. The younger riders are nervous and about to run, but Jessica's father's voice calms them down. The conviction in his voice causes them to stop moving as he orders them to remain. Take a stand. Make a change for the better. Soldiers do this. As a gentle reminder of the tranquility that predated the arrival of the Iron Serpents, the aroma of pine and lake water floats on the early breeze. At this moment, though, something else, the prospect of atonement, of discovering a better way, hangs in the air as the sirens approach. The majority of the men gathered on that pier have not felt anything substantial in years. In the early light of day, 2 police cruisers enter the marina parking lot, their lights dazzling in the sunlight. Sheriff Wilson gently removes his hand from his holster as he walks out in front. Deputy Martinez steps out of the second truck behind him, clearly taken aback by what he sees. Despite the approaching police officers, Edward keeps his grip on Blake and speaks calmly to them. "Salutations, Tom. I have everything under control." Sheriff Wilson examines the dispersed motorcyclists, Tank's battered visage, and Marcus' enlarged hand. Curious, he raises an eyebrow. "It seems like we were overlooked at that gathering, Dan." Edward gently explains that it's only a misunderstanding regarding the management of the marina. It was unclear to these gentlemen who exactly owns the land. Under Edward's grip, Blake writhes in pain. "What we have here is an assault. He must be apprehended." Sheriff Wilson's drawings are amusing. Someone threatening Mike Henderson's tenants with weapons was stated in his call. Also mentioned the pulling of a gun. With great care, Jessica advances, presenting the unloaded firearm and magazine independently. "Under your jurisdiction, Sheriff. He attempted to use this on my father." Deputy Martinez takes note of Jessica's expert handling of the weapon as he moves to secure it. "Miss, you are quite competent with weapons. According to her, my father instilled in me the values of respect, accountability, and knowing when to use them inappropriately." The sheriff observes the remaining motorcyclists, who, despite the overwhelming need to run away, have not yet approached their bikes. He observes steel serpents while he examines their wounds. "You guys have really strayed from your typical domain." Despite his motorcycle persona, Marcus advances with a military air. "Please accept our voluntary surrender, sir." Blake's cranium curls up. "Excuse me? Do you really think that's it? Drop the mic, Blake." Subsequently, Goliath rises to his feet and stands by Marcus. "Your lead into the gutter has served us well." Sheriff Wilson gives careful attention to the 2 guys. "What? Give up?" Typically, that's not how things work in such cases. "No, sir," Marcus is on board with that, "but we've both had our senses jolted." In a metaphorical sense, he continues, casting a glance at Edward. As Deputy Martinez approaches with handcuffs, Edward effortlessly steps aside, releasing his grip on Blake. "Tom, these guys have been in the war. I believe they are prepared to regain their bearings after briefly losing it." A small change occurred in the sheriff's expression. Having served in the Gulf War himself, he has a unique empathy for the hardships endured by veterans. "Is that correct?" Goliath unknowingly assumes a posture reminiscent of a soldier by straightening his spine. "No problem at all. Division of the 10th Mountain Army. After exiting, I became disoriented. Nevertheless, Mr. Dawson did assist us in recalling some crucial details." In reference to Edward, Sheriff Wilson states that he is a Navy SEAL. Lessons from him tend to stick. Following their older comrades' example, the younger motorcyclists approach to offer themselves up for surrender. As Deputy Martinez fastens the handcuffs, Blake is the only one who persists in resisting, yelling and thrashing around. "Spit out by Blake, and you're all dead." This will be heard by the club. As a result, they will. If we remain involved at all, Marcus firmly interrupts to say that the club is going to have new leadership. With a subtle sense of contentment, Edward observes the scenario as it unfolds. You brought up that veterans program last month. It could be helpful for these guys, Sheriff. Leaving from Portland, isn't it? If they're serious about changing, Sheriff Wilson thinks the same way. We are, Goliath murmurs softly. Excuse me, sir, we. The words elude him as he tries to release years of suppressed emotion. Edward softly advises the soldier to take it easy. Taking things slowly. Standing by her father's side, Jessica observes as Deputy Martinez guides a still unsteady Blake to the waiting patrol cruiser. My father? Did you not know? Considering that they are veterans? Edward confirms what was suspected. I could tell it by watching how they acted and moved. Are men such averse to that? Nothing about them is horrible, thus they aren't lost. Because they are in quest of an item they formerly possessed, they have become disoriented. The other motorcyclists are told by Sheriff Wilson to take a seat on a bench close by while he takes a few calls. Now that the machismo of the bikers has worn off, their military credentials are on full display as they stand their ground and refuse to run. Who is Mr. Dawson? Marcus, he grumbles. Gratitude is mine. Not for the combat, but for. To indicate something, he just makes a vague movement. Since you came to see us. Observing us closely. With a nod, Edward expresses his agreement. You are troops. The lapse of memory was temporary. This is your chance to reflect. The sun is now higher in the sky, and the lake is reflecting the rising temperature. A new form of tension has emerged in place of the earlier anarchy. The conflict that arises when men must decide on their destinies and deal with the possibility of atonement. What comes next? Jessica softly inquires. Right now. Edward, the speaker says. These guys have an opportunity to return home. My darling, true power does not reside in vanquishing an adversary. The key is to assist them in improving themselves. After putting his phone aside, Sheriff Wilson comes back. Good news arrived. Room available in Veterans Program. Judge Johnson is open to considering other sentencing options in light of the facts and the defendant's prior military service. He surveys the motorcyclists. Assuming everyone is up for the task, of course. Looking at their younger friends, Goliath and Marcus exchange knowing glances. A weight of potential hangs in the air as the moment unfolds. No problem at all. They all make the same sound. Instilled by years of service, the response is automatic. On her family's pier, Jessica observes the metamorphosis as the morning progresses. The brash and menacing Iron Serpents who showed up are no longer with us. Taking their place are men who, with the right support and encouragement, may rediscover their true selves. And there was her father, the reserved fisherman who had demonstrated time and time again that wisdom, not aggression, is the source of real strength. Keeps a watchful eye on everything, his expression betraying the wisdom that certain triumphs need no fighting at all. The struggle for atonement, the true battle, has hardly begun. Eagles Point Harbor Police Station's bright lights slam exhausted features into harsh shadows. In the waiting area, Edward sits next to Jessica as Sheriff Wilson processes the motorcyclists. Goliath and Marcus sat silently across the glass divider, their leather cuts appearing strangely out of place in the harsh lighting. Who is Mr. Dawson? With a clipboard in hand, Deputy Martinez approaches. Your statement is required. Out of the holding cells comes yelling before Edward has a chance to react. The poisonous, desperate sound of Blake's voice reverberates throughout the station. In your opinion, does this have any impact? Oh my, Dawson, you're dead. Our daughter has passed away. The team will. It's sufficient. The air is sliced by Sheriff Wilson's order. It is easy to see his authority even from inside the walls. Regardless of the danger, Edward sits calmly. Jessica searches his face for a trace of worry, but all she sees is serene assurance. Do you think he ever gives up? Quietly, she inquires. Men find that appealing, Edward says. They equate loudness with power. They are drowning more rapidly the more they yell. Martinez, the deputy, moves in an awkward way. Given the seriousness of his threats, sir, it is imperative that we address countermeasures. No need, Edward says while softly cutting in. Every valuable thing to Blake has already been taken away. His authority, his standing, and his command over his peers. Those dangers. They don't actually do anything. They can make out Marcus and Sheriff Wilson having a private conversation via the glass. His once confident demeanor as a biker enforcer has given way to the grave seriousness befitting an authoritative figure. Your dad was correct. They are taken aback by Tank's loud voice. He and another deputy stand in the doorway. It's over for Blake. His leadership had become old news to the club. Is that it? The man scoffs. He has met his demise. Edward gives the large man a serious look. Is that so? A little slouch appears on Tank's shoulders. We have an offer from Judge Johnson. Veterans program instead of jail time. Counseling. Orientation for the workplace. Everything included. His next words elude him as he hesitates. Would you be prepared to recommend me or us? Express our sincere commitment to making a change. Jessica pays close attention to her father. Just hours ago, he had attempted to intimidate her on the dock. This man is the same. However, his expression has changed. A weak spot. Unprecedented optimism. I already did, Edward informs him. They contacted the head of the program while they were handling your case. My former SEAL buddy is in charge of it. He's thinking about you. Wide eyes broaden in Tank. Would you voluntarily do it for us? When are we finished? Edward concedes that your actions were incorrect. But what are you doing right now? Make the decision to alter your behavior. It requires greater bravery than any battle. The large man quickly turns aside, blinking in an effort to conceal the sudden wetness in his eyes. With a stack of papers in hand, Sheriff Wilson makes an appearance by his side. According to the sheriff, everything is ready to go. The transaction was approved by Judge Johnson. I hear that tomorrow morning you guys are heading to Portland. He gives Goliath a stern look. Do not cause me to feel remorse for standing up for you. Excuse me, sir. Goliath reacts mechanically, resuming its military posture. Nothing will disappoint you. Marcus and the younger riders are also informed about the same thing, and they may observe this via the glass. Their expressions range from relief and disbelief to what appears to be hope. From inside the prison cells, Blake's voice echoes once more, but it is now fainter. Very frantic. All that once was menace is now just the helpless fury of a guy seeing his world fall apart. As Sheriff Wilson tells Jessica, her father is the one. These men haven't had anything like what he's given them for quite some time. Then what is it? Her question is perceptive. The sheriff assures them that it's an opportunity to reacquaint themselves. It can be as simple as that at times. Edward gets to his feet, effortlessly capturing the attention of everyone around him. He warns Goliath that the program is difficult. More challenging than anything Blake has ever asked of you. But that kind of toughness is just right. Rather than tearing things down, they construct. Deeply serious, Goliath nods. Enjoy using the service. Edward is in complete agreement with that. You won't have to settle for the fake version of structure, purpose, and brotherhood, you'll have the real deal. Marcus steps into the threshold, his countenance betraying the burden of choices and trajectories. Whether you'd be open to discussing your experiences following your release, Mr. Dawson and the others are interested in hearing your story. Jessica looks across at Edward and gives him a supportive grin. Excuse me, Dad. Their ears must be pricked. For the following hour, there is just little chatter. Edward gets down with the ex-motorcyclists and talks to them about their transition, how they found meaning after serving, and how they are creating a life that pays tribute to their training without letting violence define them. The guys who came as threats start to look less like threats and more like soldiers as Jessica looks through the glass as their steely expressions soften and protective postures relax. Standing by her side, Sheriff Wilson watches. This is better for your dad than a prison term may be. Jessica murmurs softly that he's showing them another way. Just as he has done before. Blake has fallen silent while speaking from the prison cells. The sound of a man facing the results of his decisions has replaced his threats, which had previously been audible. On the other hand, the main chamber has an other atmosphere. A low hum of men rediscovering their past selves, exploring their potential future selves, and, in the unlikeliest of places, finding a way to regain their honor. With the guidance of a former SEAL who knows that the biggest wins aren't often about winning battles, but about helping people find their way home, the metamorphosis that started on a foggy morning at Eagles Point Harbor keeps going. As Edward and Jessica eventually depart from the police station, darkness falls over Eagles Point Harbor. Although they are both physically and mentally drained from the day's activities, an air of satisfaction permeates the room. Mr. Dawson, hold on a second. Marcus yells from behind them as they make their way to the truck. Jogging over, he's sporting his trademark Iron Serpents cut, which gives him a new look. You should be aware of this. Edward glances across at the ex-enforcer and notices his worried expression. Describe it. My name is Blake. Before they took his phone, he managed to make a call. Razor, his lieutenant, in the clubhouse. Marcus anxiously looks around. Never served, never had dignity to lose, Razor isn't like the rest of us. He's vicious and has around 15 men who blindly follow him. Even while he seems unfazed, Jessica can feel her father tightening slightly alongside her. For how many hours? Marcus concedes that they are likely already en route. Not only is Razor not one to play around, but he has been actively seeking a pretext to depose Blake. This would provide him with the opportunity. Edward thinks on this data, his tactical mind already planning possible outcomes. As a rule, how do they function? Rapid, unannounced, tank-assisted emergence from behind Marcus. After what transpired here, Razor trails off, appearing embarrassed, despite his penchant for making examples of individuals. Dear Dad, Edward delicately lifts a hand as Jessica begins. We need to get ready, he continues quietly, and then Sheriff Wilson has to know. The news causes a tremor of stress among the police officers within the station. Because of the small town's limited resources, Sheriff Wilson starts to mobilize extra deputies right away. In all, the sheriff has 6 deputies, he says, laying out a map on his desk. Goliath gloomily confirms that they will attack hard if they come in force as you're saying. This is exactly what Razor had been hoping for. Edward pays close attention to the map. The major road is where he thinks they'll probably come in, he says. They can't do it without it, since it provides them with cover right up until the end. According to Deputy Martinez, we need to get out of the marina. No, Edward strongly asserts, that is precisely their goal, to expel people and demonstrate their dominance. Run. Not us. As the strategist reappears, Jessica keeps her eyes on her father's countenance. My father, what's the plot? In response, Edward says, we use what we have. His voice assumes the subdued authority that comes from leading troops in combat for many years. Your deputies can take care of these things, Sheriff. Tell me, Tank, how many of your soldiers are ready to fight alongside us? Goliath gets itself upright. Everyone here, sir. We have decided. Absolutely no turning back at this point. In agreement, Marcus gives a nod. What these individuals think and do is second nature to us. It is our pleasure to be of service. Wilson, the sheriff, seemed doubtful. The men that caused disturbance this morning are the ones you want me to put my faith in? No, Edward breaks it to him. I implore you to have faith in warriors who have not forgotten their pledge. Distinction exists. Blake watches them through the window of the holding cell, his face a mask of anger and terror. His warnings about the impending bloodshed from Razor have gone unheeded thus far. Marcus thinks we have about 2 hours. Until nightfall, they will remain concealed. Plan B is already in the works as Edward nods. Okay, I'm done. Sheriff, I have certain calls that I need to take. Some locals, including ex-coaches and operators, owe me favors. Dear Dad, Jessica steps in. I will remain here. I had no intention of asking you to surprising everyone, Edward responds. All the way around that marina, finding any possible hiding place or advantage. Your gaze is required. The hour that follows is jam-packed with action. Support promises from unexpected sources are brought to light by Edward's calls. Retired special operators peacefully residing in the neighborhood. Being a man means standing up to bullies and safeguarding your community. In order to position themselves according to what Goliath and Marcus know about Razor's techniques, they collaborate with their older brother. The younger riders, who are anxious to show the world how serious they are about their new career, go headfirst into getting ready. Protecting the marina is no longer the exclusive objective. In a moment of calm, Goliath informs them. It's about demonstrating an alternate path to them. Jessica, as Mr. Dawson demonstrated, assists in coordinating the recently arrived civilian volunteers. The fearful, those who work on the docks, and fishermen are targeted. There is a desire to stand together in the community, something that her father's example has encouraged. While checking radio communications, Marcus tells her father did more than simply defeat us today. To fight for something genuine is something he brought to our attention, and he roused us. As it sets over Eagles Point Harbor, the sun casts a series of orange and purple hues over the sky. Under the encroaching night, men who were adversaries just hours ago are preparing to stand side by side, bound by a bond that transcends intimidation and fear. At the far end of the main dock, Edward stands, his gaze fixed on the setting sun. He knows from years of fighting that the impending battle will put their defenses and their dedication to doing things properly to the test. Keeping calm is key, he tells the assembled defenders. Nobody acts heroically or takes needless risks. We're not trying to instigate a conflict, but rather to demonstrate that our community is together. With the same determination that made them formidable warriors in the past, the ex-Iron Serpents nod in comprehension. A second chance has been offered to them, and they plan to make the most of it. The calm before the storm approaches as twilight descends over Eagles Point Harbor. On this occasion, though, it will not find easy prey when danger roars down the road. Something completely different will emerge, a society that is strong and united, led by a guy who knows that the most important thing is not to use force alone but to have the guts to fight for what you believe in. The time has come to start the actual test. The stillness of the evening is shattered by the low rumble of motorbikes. The synchronized rumble of a tiny army, not the dispersed advance of a few of motorcycles. While standing at his vantage position close to the marina office, Edward keeps track of the many motor noises. Speaking softly into his radio, he announces 20 bikes. Surpassing our expectations. Numbering 23. Tank's response is a buzzing sound. Those engines are familiar to me. Everyone, including the prospects, was dragged in by Razor. As the headlights draw near, Jessica, stationed in the marina surveillance room, keeps an eye on the security cameras. You were absolutely right, Dad, they are indeed moving in a wedge pattern. Marcus contributes from his vantage point since Razor is predictable. There must be a constant display of force. Headlights illuminate the marina parking lot as the bikers swarm in. Lean and stocky, with a face covered with jagged scars, Razor is every bit the moniker. First, he turns off his engine since the abrupt quiet is even more terrifying than the roar. The sound of Razor's voice echoes through Marina Dawson. "It is our understanding that you have arrived. Do what's right and accept the consequences." On the radio, Edward keeps his voice level. Positions are held by all. It is their turn to initiate contact. Razor gets off his horse, and his men follow. Their chains, bats, and less than stellar concealment of more deadly weaponry. In an effort to secure the whole entry to the marina, the gang disperses. "According to Razor, you have degraded our president. Cast a shadow over our team. There is a cost to that. Is this the president you appointed?" As he emerges from the shadows, hands relaxed at his sides, Edward's voice pierces the darkness. Blake was reportedly facing major consequences as of late. It seems like the club might use some fresh faces at the helm. Razor's pupils constrict. "Is that the point? Do you intend to assume control?" "No," Edward says curtly. "The Iron Serpents need to be reminded of what honor looks like, in my opinion." "Honor?" Spit from the Razor hits the floor. "Like those young men in the military, you sound like that. When honor turned rat, she locked them up." "The guys?" All the way across the parking lot, you can hear Edward's voice. "They rediscovered their true selves. Protectors and warriors, not thugs in disguise." Spread out further, Razor tells his guys. "Without fail, the speeches. Old man, this is serious business. You tarnished our good name. We harmed you now. A final opportunity," Edward whispers softly. "Go while the getting is good." In the pitch blackness, Razor chuckles. "Alternatively, what? Like you did to Blake, you're going to knock us all out. I'll admit that you're good. Still, you're only a man." "Does he?" The Iron Serpents are behind the source of the voice. Goliath emerges from hiding, trailed by the younger motorcyclists who have opted to accompany him. They stand tall in their military bearing, having removed their Iron Serpents cuts. "Then what is this?" Scissors smirk. "Who wants to perish first, the traitors?" More individuals appear out of the shadows. Men with the serene assurance that comes with years of special operations training, including Sheriff Wilson, his deputies, and local fishermen. Reaction from Edward's previous teammates to his calling. "Behold, the blade." Calmly, Edward says. "Your weak spot has always been that. You believe that power is derived from a state of fear and intimidation. But true power?" He points to the civilians encircling the gang. "Solidarity, as a community, is the source of true strength." The men of Razor tremble uncomfortably as they become acutely aware that they are encircled. Their supposed tactical advantage has completely vanished. According to Edward, this is your chance to modify, improving one's quality of life. Your brothers made the same decision. According to Razor, they are not brothers. That's all they are. Now that Tank's word has power, we are no longer mere soldiers. Prior to our time as serpents. And once again, we've decided to be soldiers. Uncertainty permeates Razor's soldiers as they gaze up at their leader, heightening the tension. The group had anticipated encountering a lone individual to subdue. Rather, they have discovered a whole town that is revolting against them. "Just one more opportunity," Edward says. "The cuts can be left here. Exit the room. Keep moving forward. You might also take a chance. But hear me out." Carrying the weight of battle experience, his voice dips ever so slightly. "I have enough ex-special operations troops here, as well as snipers on the roof of the marina and deputies prepared to use riot gear, so this should be a very unpleasant experience for you." "You're bluffing," Razor says as his hand slides near his waistband. His and his key lieutenant's chests are suddenly covered with red spots. The point is well made. I don't bluff, Edward whispers. I have never done it before. Out of nowhere, a younger kid serving under Razor takes off his cut and drops it. Next, yet another. And yet another. The gang's solidarity is eroding like dominoes. With his face distorted with wrath and disbelief, Razor stands alone. Now. Damn, you're dead. Everyone here. The team will. In the club, Marcus walks forward, steps in, and ends the conversation. This particular rendition is, at least. He surveys the surviving faithful followers. It was planned that we would be brothers. Our true nature was that of thugs. It is time to choose an improved path. The clanging of leather blades against the floor echoes through the night. As a group, Razor's army capitulates to the prospect of a brighter future rather than capitulation to force. Razor is the only one who has not given up, his hand lingering over his hidden weapon. Still maintaining his composure, Edward observes the look of desperation on his face. Edward gently informs him that it is his choice. Pick wisely, though. There are some things you can't undo. As everyone waits for Razor to make a decision, the Iron Serpent's fate hangs in the balance. The marina goes quiet. When Razor feels his entire world crumble, he quakes at the sight of his weapon. Even if the sniper sight's red dots are fixed on his chest, he isn't giving in to the fear of force alone. It's the understanding that his dominance was an illusion, the sight of discarded cuts littering the ground, and the complete stillness of his men. Not possible. He sounds nervous. Attempting this will be overwhelming for you. The club is absolutely crucial. The Iron Serpents are our name. We're not much at all. Interrupting, a former lieutenant of his removes his own cut. No more than frightened guys acting like we don't exist. Careful and measured, Edward steps forward. Razor, do you realize what I see in your eyes? Look at this guy, no one has ever believed in him. Someone whose entire sense of self is based on intimidating others since he never learnt respect. At last, Razor lets go of his weapon, and his shoulders slump. My identity is a mystery to you. I can tell you're exhausted, Edward whispers softly. Bored with constantly being the room's most intimidating presence. Willing to stop keeping tabs on you. Sick of living dishonorably. As he draws near, Sheriff Wilson prepares to handcuff the suspect. You have more than one option here, my son. Pick the correct one. From where she stands, Jessica sees Razor's countenance change. Like ice in the spring, the artificial harshness, the hardness, splits. Whenever Razor speaks, I always listen. This is something I never desired. I yearned for a sense of belonging. Step forward, Goliath says, and you can. However, this is not on par with it. Without dread. He is joined by Marcus. The club will be rebuilt by us. Take it to the next level. Something that aids veterans in regaining their sense of self rather than further disorientation. Standing uncut, Razor surveys his old crew, who appear bewildered and liberated all at once. Where do I stand? According to Edward, it's up to you to decide. There is an opening for another veteran in the program. Put forth the time and effort if you're serious about doing it. As Razor ponders the decision, the nighttime air tensely holds its breath. At long last, he cleans his wound, his hands trembling ever so slightly. A gentle thud sounds when the leather hits the floor, reverberating across the marina. With a trembling voice, he confesses, I'm tired. So exhausted. Edward raises a hand in protest as Sheriff Wilson advances. Just a moment. He moves gently toward Razor. There is an action that must be taken prior to any subsequent events. Then what is it? It is the appropriate thing to do, not out of fear or fear of punishment, to apologize to my daughter. Razor faces Jessica as Jessica draws nearer. A tiny, human-looking figure has emerged from his mission to inspire terror. He apologizes. His voice actually sounds moved, which is a first for the entire day. Regardless of anything, I was completely incorrect. Gracefully accepting the apologies, Jessica nods. Much obliged. Anxiety-ous times for the marina are starting to go away. As Edward's old comrades gather the abandoned guns, Sheriff Wilson's deputies take over the formal surrenders. What comes next? Seeming disoriented without his cut, one of the younger motorcyclists inquires. Now, Edward says, here's an opportunity for everyone to rediscover themselves, free from these patches. The veterans program will be selected by some of you. Even if some people end up on other roads, you still have a chance to pick. Marcus and Goliath start to pile the cut pieces that were thrown away. Like troops laying down their weapons after a long battle, it has an air of ceremoniality about it. Marcus begs Mr. Dawson, would you lend us a hand in setting them on fire? Imagine yourself in the role. Edward beholds the heap of leather, once emblems of dread and terror, now a pyre of salvation. Last but not least, he explains that this must originate with you, your decision, your fresh start. The cuts start to smolder, their embers stretching toward the stars, and Jessica rushes to be by her father's side. Are you aware that this is how it will conclude? Even when he says no, I was hoping. Just showing someone another route can do the trick sometimes. As it rises, the fire consumes what has come before and illuminates the path to what is to come. Burning away more than simply leather and patches, the faces of the men who came for a fight but discovered forgiveness are highlighted by the flames that surround it. Razor quietly provides information that will aid in dismantling the criminal aspects of the club, standing by Sheriff Wilson. It's more than just giving up, it's making amends. We'll need help to rebuild and make it right, Goliath adds as he watches the fire. Nodding, Edward gives the signal. You will possess it, but the true effort must be exerted by you, individually. Even the darkness has dissipated, it still envelopes them. In its place, there is hope, and doors are beginning to open where there were before just barriers. These men start to perceive glimmers of their potential selves in the whirling fires that devour the artifacts of their history. Just hours ago, the marina at Eagles Point Harbor was transformed by the breaking of dawn, when the rising sun cast long shadows across the area. As Edward stands at the end of the pier, he can still smell the burnt leather in the air. He watches as the first fishing boats set out for the day. He is joined by Jessica, who is holding 2 mugs of coffee. The early charter, according to Mike, was cancelled. As he takes the coffee, Edward assures us that, despite yesterday night's events, they will return. Courage is more vividly remembered than fear. Their focus is piqued by the sound of boots striking wood. Without their haircuts, Goliath and Marcus approach in an odd but nevertheless more genuine way. Marcus softly announces that the transportation is arriving. We will be transported to the veterans program in Portland by them. Razor too includes Tank. There's been a change in his demeanor since last night. Instead of plotting, he seems to be contemplating quietly. With a nod, Edward acknowledges the importance. Internal conflicts are the most challenging. When they hear cars coming, they quickly spin around. In the marina parking lot, 2 unidentified vans and Sheriff Wilson's vehicle are seen. The former Iron Serpents slowly make their way out of temporary custody, their eyes widening in the light of daylight. An older member, Mr. Dawson, hesitates before coming over to the group and yells out. When the program is over, will we be able to return? That's what we were wondering. Rather than as serpents, how about as community members? His task is completed by Edward. Your actions with this opportunity will determine that. With a look that betrays the weariness of a night on his face, Sheriff Wilson joins them. Even for Razor, Judge Johnson gave his approval, albeit he still has a few more requirements to fulfill. Jessica observes as the formerly incarcerated individuals start to get into the waiting vans. There is no longer any pretense of strength or swagger. There are just men here, and some of them are scared of change, while others are cautiously hopeful. Tell them, she says abruptly to her dad. Right away, Edward gets it. An excellent helper is always in demand at the marina, he tells the men who are waiting. Those who are familiar with boats and have a grasp of discipline. There will be a spot for you after you've finished the task. Their expressions reveal the effect of his remarks. The promise of legal belonging and honest employment hits close to home for males who are accustomed to taking what they want. Would you put your faith in someone like us? Razor, who has not spoken since his surrender, asks from the doorway of the van. What now, after all that? Edward says that trust must be earned, but that everyone should have the opportunity to do so. The vans are about to leave when Marcus makes one final U-turn. Much obliged. For reasons other than merely halting our progress, but also regarding. His words droop on the page. Thanks for revealing our potential. He is spared the last touch by Tank. Who we were meant to be from the start. The men who had come as dangers now find themselves as opportunities as the vehicles drive away. As they go, Sheriff Wilson observes with a little shake of his head. He tells Edward, I never expected it to end like this, when Mike called about troublesome motorcyclists. As a result, neither did they, says Edward. One thing about crossroads is that you can never tell which way will lead you. News travels quickly through Eagles Point Harbor in the morning. Each recounting deepens the story of a man whose quiet strength transformed adversaries into friends, of a community's unwavering solidarity, and of redemption's unexpected arrival to the most unlikely of places. Some local fishermen dropped by the marina to provide a hand, while others were more curious and wanted to know more. Without sugarcoating anything, Edward relates the story, highlighting the bravery required to change rather than his personal involvement. He informs Jessica that another boat is about to set sail, that the real test is about to begin. Making a difference isn't confined to a single evening's choices, it encompasses each subsequent day. As he approaches, Mike Henderson carries paperwork. He mentions that the insurance company might inquire, but he maintains a positive attitude. Still, it was well worth it because I haven't felt like a true member of this community in years at this location. Edward says it has always done. It was necessary to remind some people. A new feeling of possibility, of boundaries crumbling, of wounds starting to heal has settled into the air as the morning progresses, bringing with it the usual rhythms of marina life. So, you're hoping they'll succeed? As Jessica watches the vans fade away, she asks. Can you pull it off? Edward gives the subject considerable thought. Not everyone will. Although they lost something earlier, they now have something, and change isn't easy. Then what is it? Hope, he adds plainly, and that can be enough at first. The remnant of the morning fog being burned away as the sun rises higher. Eagles Point Port is now a different port, yet another day begins there. More powerful not as a result of fortifications erected, but as a result of links established between parties that formerly harbored animosity toward one another. It all starts in Portland, where a program is in place to assist missing soldiers in reuniting with their families. Edward gets his first letter 1 week following the altercation at Eagles Point Harbor. The writing is slow and methodical, as if the author were taking their time to choose the perfect words, and the material is plain notebook paper. While getting the charter boat ready for the morning, he narrates a bedtime story to Jessica, his beloved. The program's first week has over. It's the perfect amount of difficulty, harder than anything Blake has ever demanded of us. Marcus is coordinating veteran support groups while Tanks leads morning physical therapy. Razor is also attempting. Jessica stops what she's doing. Did everyone write? Edward shows her the stack of letters and checks that each one is correct. Various points of view, identical narrative. Thinking back on their lives before the Iron Serpents has helped them rediscover their potential. Even the marina has transformed. Instead of hostility, people are now curious when motorbikes come close. Word on the street is that that fateful night an ally was made out of an enemy thanks to the insight of one man. Wilson, the sheriff, drops by to give an update. Heard back from the program director, who claims he has never witnessed a group trying so hard to make a change. The skeptics are beginning to change their minds as well. As Edward expertly coils rope, he explains that they needed a goal. A purpose greater than their own person. In keeping with the topic of missions, the sheriff goes on. Do you recall the other MC chapters about which you were concerned? Those who you believed could strike back. With his hands steadily working, Edward gives a nod. Your old SEAL comrades apparently spoke with them. Very thought-provoking discussions. All of a sudden, veteran outreach programs are capturing their attention. Jessica notices a subtle grin on her father's face. Those in your squad have been quite occupied. According to Edward, people simply want to improve. They only require reassurance that it is feasible at times. At this moment, the familiar rumble is approaching the marina in a new way. 2 motorbikes drive in, and the riders' leather jackets are spotless, devoid of any gang emblems. The reason their brothers were transformed is finally understood by the former SEAL Serpents who were out from town during the confrontation. Edward stands at the edge of the dock, calm and prepared to welcome them. With evident apprehension, the riders get off their horses, take off their helmets, and approach. One of us says that we overheard the events. Overheard our brothers figuring it out. According to Edward, there's always an alternate approach. Is discovering it something you're interested in? I agree with you. In the marina office, Edward recounts the tale once more over coffee. Rather than a story of failure, it is a story of growth. He takes out the letters and shows them the transformation of their long-lost brothers. He warns them that it will be difficult. Embracing change is often challenging, but the rewards are worth it. 2 more lives are being redeemed instead of destroyed by the time 2 more motorcycles are on their way to Portland by afternoon. While they go, Mike Henderson watches. When I first contacted you that morning to report the danger, I honestly believed that we would be fortunate if no one was killed. Weirdly, we ended up saving lives instead than causing harm. We didn't save them, Edward kindly corrects. By our example, they were able to rescue themselves. More people come out during the day. After years of terror from the Iron Serpents, the local business owners finally show up to thank Edward. Inquiries on the program are made by younger veterans who have heard of it. The community is being rewoven one thread at a time with each discourse. Standing at the end of the dock where it all started, Jessica spots her father as the sun sets. She claims to have received another letter and is displaying an envelope. Once again, from Razor. With a contemplative expression on his face, Edward reads it silently. At last he admits that he's having trouble. And still, he persists. Claims ignorance about alternative forms of strength was his biggest mistake. If you hadn't shown him, Jessica continues. Edward points out the error till he decides to view it. Here, that is the true triumph. Their decision to stand up for themselves was more important than our standing up to them. Eagles Point Harbor is bathed in a kaleidoscope of purples and golds as night falls. Now, potential exists where dread formerly resided. In places where there was formerly animosity, mutual comprehension is taking root. With little hesitation but unwavering resolve, a young veteran approaches Edward. I am aware of what transpired and the details of the program, sir. When I first got out, I thought maybe it was because I was having problems. Warmly, Edward invites you to come on. We can discuss it. You should know right away that you are not in this alone. Now we go on to a different story. Instead of wallowing in misery, another life finds renewed optimism. Rebuilding their lives, ex-Iron Serpents are making their way to Portland. Eagles Point Harbor is a place where people are more united and less afraid of one another. A father and daughter carry on their work on the peaceful pier where it all started, understanding that sometimes the biggest wins aren't won by vanquishing foes but by converting them into allies. The metamorphosis is ongoing. Life is lived, one decision at a time. Jessica returns to the marina a month following the fateful night in Eagles Point Harbor to see her father engrossed in yet another stack of letters. She walks into the office with him, and the lake reflects the early sun. Edward informs her, Tank's group finished their first month, without raising an eyebrow. Records for growth are being established, according to the program director. Even Razors, who is just starting out, has found a mentor in Marcus. Former Iron Serpents undergo a metamorphosis as they re-establish relationships with families they had abandoned, acquire new trades, and attend treatment, as chronicled in the letters. Jessica, though, is more interested in the finer points. Assisting other veterans with boat maintenance through Goliath instruction. Support groups are being organized by Marcus. Razor subtly assisting newbies in adjusting. Her observation is that they aren't merely evolving. Along with themselves, they are assisting others in making changes. Nearby, a vehicle transporting Mike Henderson's brand new security system comes up. Two recognizable faces emerge, though, former Iron Serpents who opted to study technical skills after completing the initial program phase, instead of the usual installers. One of them yells out, "Mr. Dawson," as he stands more upright than before. That pledge of honest labor is something we intend to fulfill. As they expertly unload their equipment, Edward observes. Quiet expertise and purpose, without bravado or intimidation. What's it like being a civilian? Truly, the male responds in a different way. Much better. Still has its challenges, but getting better. Even the marina has changed. There is now a feeling of belonging where there was once anxiety and distrust. People still remembered the lesson they learned from the Iron Serpents incident, what they could achieve as a team. More news arrives from Sheriff Wilson. The program is growing, according to news I received from Portland. For future chapters and clubs to follow, they are studying yours. It appears that news is getting out about what transpired here. Unsurprised, Edward gives a nod. Everyone wants to make a change, they simply need to believe it's achievable. A familiar kind of call about motorcyclists causing trouble at a local business crackles the police radio. But another voice interjects before everyone has a chance to respond. It's Marcus, who came back to town to see some friends. "Sheriff, I've got this one," he declares emphatically. Hoping someone with experience in the field may sway their decision. As they listen to Marcus calm the bikers down by relating his own experience to help them understand, Jessica observes her father's reaction. No threats or violence, just a lone veteran trying to help others who have wandered from the path. Understatedly, Edward notes that he excels at that. More effective than his previous attempts at coercion. The F.O. Iron Serpents are having coffee with Mike Henderson in the afternoon while they discuss possible future projects, and the security system is already set up. Various patches now adorn their leather coats. Not gang symbols, but emblems of labor unions and organizations that aid veterans. "I never imagined I'd see this day," Mike tells Edward. The same men who attempted to seize control of the marina are now assisting in its defense. The tension in the air dissipates as a motorbike rumbles into the parking lot. Goliath is here, as promised, to pay a visit. His bike is now adorned with stickers that show respect for veterans, rather than gang emblems. "Hi, Mr. Dawson." He takes off his helmet to meet you. "Do you have something to display?" He then takes out pictures of the community center at the program's former gang members are constructing as their most recent project. An organization that helps veterans find meaning and community. Razor is seen working side by side with others in one photo, imparting the building skills he had acquired during the program. According to Tank, it's no longer solely about us. It's about preventing other veterans from feeling so adrift that they consider joining a gang as their sole choice. With each passing hour, new indications of transformation emerge. Companies in the area that were afraid of the Iron Serpents are now helping program grads find work and other possibilities. Mentors can be found in the most unlikely of locations by young veterans who are looking for advice. With her father's aid, Jessica gets the last charter ready for the day while she observes him teach a group of veterans the ropes. Attracted by the tale of what transpired at Eagles Point Harbor, some of them are ex-gang members from different clubs. Do you understand the true transformation? A question crosses her mind while she and her father tend to their workhouse. Not only did they cease to be criminals, but their transition into leadership roles is the key. With a look of obvious pride on his face, Edward gives a nod. It was always intended for them to be that way. For a while, they simply forgot. Marcus comes back from his successful intervention as night falls. Observing the sunset from a different perspective, he joins them on the pier. Admittingly, a month ago, he would have dealt with that matter by threatening to do something. What you were attempting to tell us has finally clicked with me. Being fearsome isn't the mark of a true strongman. The key, Edward says, is guiding people to their own inner fortitude. As they begin to illuminate the port, the lights bounce off the serene ocean. Additional lives are being restored in Portland. A community is flourishing in Eagles Point Harbor. Peace has taken root on a tranquil pier, where violence had threatened to destroy everything before. What started as one man standing up to intimidation has grown into something far more. A movement of individuals striving to improve themselves, of communities supporting one another, and of veterans aiding veterans. Even as night falls, the lights at Eagles Point Harbor are more brilliant than they have ever been. Edward addresses a throng at Portland's brand new Veteran Support Center, 3 months after the altercation that altered Eagles Point Harbor. Once a dilapidated warehouse, the structure now stands as a monument to change, having been restored by the very people who dealt in terror and intimidation there. According to him, none of this was planned. He makes this statement before a gathering of community leaders, ex-gang members, and veterans. I felt that there had to be a more efficient method. At the platform, Goliath stands by his side, his enormous physique now bearing a new form of power. Strength, as Mr. Dawson taught us, is not in instilling dread in others but in helping them rise above their circumstances. A lot of people are milling around the center. Marcus oversees a support group for veterans who are having difficulty adjusting to civilian life in one room. In a different one, Razor instructs students in practical skills. His newfound composure is a striking change from his erratic behavior in the past. The true miracle, you know. While touring the building, Jessica whispers something to her father. They're not just changing, they're also inspiring others to do the same. The proof is all around us, former Iron Serpents collaborating with other veterans, exchanging anecdotes, and providing encouragement. Instead of frightening symbols, the walls of the former gang's clubhouse now display success stories, transforming it into a career training center. At the center's formal opening, Sheriff Wilson takes Edward aside. Do you recall that you predicted that not all of them would survive? The results are in, and with an 87% success rate, it's clearly unprecedented. Things get interesting when they hear a ruckus outside the door. Blake, who has just been released and is now a part of the program, stands nervously at the door. Uncertainty has supplanted his previous arrogance. First, Goliath goes up to him. Brother, you've arrived at your true home. From across the room, Edward and Blake lock eyes. I never considered. In the end, though. Edward says it simply, everyone deserves an opportunity to find their way back. Additional revelations surface as the day progresses. Businesses in the area have noticed an uptick in the hiring of veterans. Dropping crime rates are a direct result of gang members opting for rehabilitation rather than retaliation. We have received inquiries from other motorcycling groups interested in launching their own transformation initiatives. Marcus presents data derived from their outreach initiatives. 15 additional clubs across 3 states have been contacted, 10 of these groups have commenced their own veteran assistance programs. Razor trains a group of young veterans in the center's workshop on the trade skills he has perfected. Not lines of rage or aggression, but lines of focus and determination, have appeared on his face. He tells Edward during a break that he never expected to be a good teacher. Believed for a long time that strength meant reducing other people to weakness. A true strength, I've come to realize, is the ability to empower those around you. For the sake of the center's records, Jessica keeps a close eye on everything. Keep in mind that they initially arrived at the marina. "Dad, I need your advice," she inquired. "How drastically changed everything?" "The same people," Edward kindly corrects. "Only a new way forward." Additional guests, including appreciative representatives from veteran groups, arrive in the afternoon. People who have been a part of gangs before and are looking for help to begin their own transformation processes. Change is being weaved into the fabric with each discussion. Before the actual dedication ceremony of the center, Goliath calls everyone together. "Nobody could find us 3 months ago. Believed that commanding respect meant being feared. Then one guy changed our minds, and we learned that strength is in helping others, not in dominating them." Goliath continues, his voice dripping with wisdom, and the audience pays attention. "It wasn't about a single altercation at Eagles Point Harbor, it was about reclaiming our true selves and fulfilling our destiny." Standing silently in the background, Edward witnesses the domino effect of his modest act of refusing to back down in the face of intimidation, which affects more people than he could have ever dreamed. According to Sheriff Wilson, "Your father didn't only apprehend a gang that day, he also initiated a movement." He tells this to Jessica. A shocking revelation is revealed at the end of the ceremony. With the additional funds secured, the center's employment training program can assist more veterans in their transition back to civilian life. Edward is back on the center's roof, surveying Portland as night falls. As he turns around, he hears the building filled with the sounds of togetherness and purpose, laughter, talking, and people finding their way about. He is joined by Razor, who has been sober for 3 months and is now supervising the center's maintenance. "On occasion, you know what's on my mind? How nearly we failed to notice all of this. Had you simply been the person we expected you to be, you would have been easy prey." "And I wasn't," Edward whispers softly. "You also weren't what you claimed to be." Long shadows stretch across Portland as the sun sets. In the depths of darkness, more lives are being remade, more roads are being redirected, and more power is discovered through service rather than fear. Even still, in Eagles Point Harbor, the place where it all started, the lights serve as a guide for those who are lost and need to find their way back. Eagles Point Harbor sees the first light of day 6 months after the fateful incident. As the sun rises over the placid seas, Edward and Jessica stand at their usual spot on the pier, taking in the view. With the installation of new security systems and the renovation of existing facilities, the marina has undergone profound and substantial transformation. When Jessica gave her father his coffee in the morning, she said it was hard to realize it had been 6 months. "It seems like only yesterday at times." Edward looks over at the horizon, where he can see fishing boats setting sail for the morning, and gives a nod. Some of these ships are manned by men who were once Iron Serpents but have now given up the life of luxury for the life of a seaman. Nobody is on edge anymore as the sound of motorbikes draws near. Goliath established a treatment program that mixes motorcycle maintenance with peer support, and he leads a group of veterans on their monthly ride. His voice carries as he hails Mr. Dawson as he parks his bike. The Veteran Assistance Organization he helps administer now has its emblem on his leather jacket. "Got several fresh recruits here that were dying to meet you." Some of the riders are veterans adjusting to civilian life, while others are ex-gang members looking for a fresh start. Included in this group is Blake, who has been on the road to recovery for 4 months now, and whose face displays the subtle changes that accompany discovering true purpose. In a low voice, Blake tells Edward that it's still strange. Returning to this place, reflecting on its past, and taking in its present. Edward inquires if the strange is good or evil. "Very good, very good." Regular patterns emerge as the day progresses. Success stories are piling up at the Portland Center, and Marcus has reports on their development that he brings with him. Razor, who is now in charge of vocational training at the institution, shares news about the most recent graduating class. They are joined by Sheriff Wilson for the morning briefing, a new tradition that unites community leaders, veteran support services, and law enforcement. Acquired the most recent data, he boasts. This doc was the starting point for a 3-state decrease in gang activity of 70% and a 40% increase in veteran employment. Jessica witnesses a group of ex-serpents, who were formerly the bane of the neighborhood, now protecting the children who live there by teaching them how to be safe on boats. She notes that they didn't merely transform. That was the turning point. Every passing day provides more proof of metamorphosis. Veteran support groups gather in the former Iron Serpents clubhouse, which has been transformed into a community center. Currently, the parking area hosts family reunions and job fairs, the very spot where threats were made. With the same quiet power that previously turned foes into comrades, Edward guides a group of veterans through fundamental fishing tactics. The events at Eagles Point Harbor have captivated his students, some of whom are ex-gang members from other groups. Do you understand the true transformation? As he observes the situation, Goliath asks. It's not merely that we transformed into our true selves, it's that we ceased to be our former selves altogether. They prepare for a brief ritual as midday draws near. The guys who tried to take over the marina are now funding its new veteran support office, and it is being dedicated by them. As he prepares to speak, Marcus advances. We arrived here 6 months ago under the impression that strength means imposing our will on everyone. Then we were incorrect. Strength, as demonstrated by Mr. Dawson, is found in helping other people and in contributing to a greater good. People from all walks of life, including former gang members, local entrepreneurs, police officers, and returning veterans, may be seen in the gathering. Part of the story is carried by every individual. Every one of them is a strand in the fabric of change. Wearing his business clothes instead of his gang colors, Razor stands strong and delivers his own testimony. Because of our inflated sense of strength, we believed we were unbreakable. But true power? The man who stood here alone on the dock had true power. He recognized something in us that we failed to recognize in ourselves. The sun starts to set over Eagles Point Harbor, casting a rainbow of hues across the sky that makes everything seem more hopeful and optimistic. With his daughter at his side, Edward stands at the edge of the dock where it all started, observing the light dance across waters that have witnessed immense transformation. "Oh, Dad, you accomplished everything," Jessica whispers. As they observe the community they've created flourish and motivate one another, Edward corrects her. There it is. They simply required a gentle nudge to remember their true selves. As night falls over the waterfront, the community center, veteran assistance office, and homes where families have been reunited remain illuminated by their lights. After threatening to engulf the entire place in darkness, it has now become a symbol of optimism, a reminder that we can find the best in others even when they don't see it in themselves. Under the cover of darkness, the stars shine brightly on Eagles Point Harbor's placid waters, revealing a truth that had its origins in a single man's defiance of intimidation, that true strength is not in the ability to destroy, but in the bravery to assist others in rebuilding. From its humble beginnings as bikers tormenting a fisherman's daughter, this story has evolved into a powerful monument to the life-altering potential of self-respect, tolerance, and the conviction that one can always make a better decision. As the events at Eagles Point Harbor show, it just takes one brave step to make a huge difference, and our strength does not come from frightening others, but from restoring their sense of self-discovery. 2 more noteworthy tales will be shown to you shortly. You should not pass up these opportunities if this one was successful. Take a look at them with a simple click.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.